Hi guys, welcome back. If you're returning subscriber, thank you for coming back. And if you're seeing this channel for the first time, thank you for stopping by. Today I'll be showing you how to make this shirt dress with side pockets. This is something you're interested in, you want to keep watching, and let's get started. So to start off, I have 3 yards of cotton fabric. This is what I'll be using for this tutorial. You can use any fabric of your choice. Now I'm gonna head to cut out my first piece. This is for the front. Now to cut out the front, you're going to use your hip measurement, like quarter of your hip measurement plus 3 inches for your button placket allowance plus an extra 2 to 3 inches depending on how free or fitted you want it to be around your body. That's for the front piece. Then for the back piece, you're going to cut minusing that button allowance, which is 3 inches, because we're going to be using 3 inches for the button allowance. So I just cut this out and then used my length to cut out so that it's easier for us to just go straight to the point and work it out. So now what I'm doing is to just measure that 3 inches out, which I'll be using for my button allowance, because I want to fold up that end. Now this will help me to just take my measurements properly without having any interruptions. So please note, take your button allowance, okay, and also you also need an overlap allowance of at least half of an inch, okay. But if you're busty, you want to use 1 inch so that by the time you button, you don't have your buttons opening up. All right, so ensure to also add half of an inch, at least half of an inch for your button overlap allowance. So I just folded down that 3 inches and I'm just pinning it down. So remember, the 3 inches is for my button placket allowance. So after doing that, I'm going to take it off and then I'll bring in the back piece. So the back piece is going to be longer than what you have in front. The length will be longer, but for the width, it will be 3 inches shorter than what you had in front. Remember, the 3 inches extra we have for the front was for our button allowance, so you don't need that for the back, but you're going to use quarter of your round hip and then add extra allowances depending on how free or fitted you want it to be. So now that I have them, I'm going to place them together. Remember that the back piece should be longer because we're going to be making some adjustments to the back piece. Okay, so just watch closely and you get the hang of it. So ensure to fold on the wrong side of your fabric. Don't fold on the right side because you're going to be making markings with your chalk on this. So now I'm going to start off with marking my bust point. I'll mark my waist, I'll mark my hip on this, and I'll go in with my rule to just make horizontal lines. So I don't need to mark my full length because I already have that. So now that I have this, I'm going to start off by marking my shoulder measurement. So since we've already folded our button allowance, it's easier for us to work with. So go ahead and place your half of your shoulder measurement plus half of an inch, which would be for the slip joining. Go ahead and place that. And at that point, you go down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, which is the slant. Now for the neck width of this gown is a shirt, we're using 3 inches. It doesn't need to be wide because we have the front part open, and then just make a slant to that point. So I'm going to just extend this line this way so that I can, cut off this end, okay, so that we're not confused while we're making this. So now we're just going to take off the shoulder slant. So after taking this off, now this is what we have. Now we're going to adjust our front piece down by at least 1.5 inches. Okay, 1.5 inches is okay. 1.5 inches to 2 inches is okay, but I'm using 2 inches for this. So adjust it so that the back part is higher than the front by 2 inches. You can also use 1.5 inches. So I'm just making sure that I have them equally placed and on all points by measuring it out. And after that, I'm just going to fold it down. Please, if you have an iron it down so that it stays put, okay. But I'm going to use my pin to just hold it down. Now it's going to be meeting the front part. It's not going to go over it. It's going to be meeting it. All right, that's the tip of both parts needs to just align, and then you go ahead and pin it down. Like I said, If you can iron this, please iron it down so that it works better. It gives you accurate measurement. But I'm using my pins because my iron was not available at this point. So I'm just going to ensure that I place this down properly before I go ahead. So now we've taken our shoulder slant, and that solves it. So I'm going to bring in that shoulder measurement again, half of my shoulder measurement, which is half of my shoulder measurement plus half inch for my joining allowance. Then at that point, I'm going to go up from my chest line by 2 to mark my armhole depth. So I'm going to extend this line also, just make a horizontal line across and rule a vertical line between that shoulder point which I marked. So now, since we're cutting the back and front together, you want to mark both the back armhole and the front armhole. So we're starting off with the front. I'm just going to get the midpoint of what I have here, okay, and make a mark. Then at that point, I'll come in by half inch. We know that the front armhole is deeper than the back armhole by half of an inch. Then on the chest line measurement, I'll go ahead and take quarter of my round bust measurement. I'm going to add 2 inches extra to that. So 1 inch will be for ease, 1 inch will be for stitching allowance. If you want it freer, like wider than what I have here, please go ahead and add as much inches depending on the fitting you want your dress to turn out to. So I'm connecting the front armhole, and then I'll go ahead and connect the back armhole. Like I said, the front is half of an inch deeper than the back. So because we're cutting them together, you need to take note of these things. Now we're going to move over to the waist area. Take quarter of the round waist, add that same 2 inches, which is for the sewing and the ease allowance. Go over to the hip, you do the same thing and just connect that. So you're going to take quarter of your round hip measurement, add 2 inches, 1 inch for ease, 1 inch for stitching allowance. So if you want it freer, you can take that. Now from the end, you can decide to just go straight down, okay, from the end, that's from the hip area, decide to just go straight down, or you flay it out. So if you have more fabric, you want to fold more, if you want to like have the edge of the down part of your gown to have like an A-line design, you go ahead and just flay it out. So you can see what I have here. I just flayed it out very little from what I have around the hip because of the fabric I have. But if you folded more, go ahead and just flay it out as much as you want. So now we're going to work on the neck. This is important, very important. You want to watch this carefully. The first thing you want to do is to mark your neck width, which is 3 inches. So 3 inches for both the front and the back. Now for the neck depth of the front, we're going to use 2.5 inches. Now to ensure that we're on track with this, I'll measure that 2.5 inches going inside again. Now, so this is so that the neck is not so deep, right? You don't want the neck area to be too deep, and when you fit your collar, it just has this let's say lagging. It doesn't look nice when your neck is too wide on shirts. Okay, so this is what we're going to work with. So I've just made those marks, and I'm just using my curve rule to connect it. Now by the time I cut this out, you'll see that the neck area is actually nice enough. You don't want your neck to be too wide. So this is for the front part. Now we are cutting this out, please. We are cutting for the front. Do not cut the back and the front neckline together, because if you do that, the entire outfit has just gone bad. That means you have to maybe bring out new fabrics and start this all over again. So these are little details you need to take note of when you're making a shirt, anything that has buttons in front. Now for the back neckline, we're just going to use 1 inch for that. So you can see me unpinning this to cut out. That's because I don't want to make a mistake. So you go with the front first, take out only the front part of your fabric, please, and just cut out the neckline as you see me doing. Okay, then for the front, I'm going to just open it up later. I'll take off this part I have here because it's actually not needed. Now for the back part also, I'm opening this up. So what I want for my back neckline is just 1 inch. Like I said, your neckline does not need to be wide, please. And also ensure that the width is matching with what you have in front. Ensure that your neckline is not wide. Okay, I'm emphasizing on that because a lot of people make mistakes with that. So you can see I just used 1 inches for the neck depth of the back and connected it to my 3 inches neck width. You can also use 2.5 for your neck width, okay, depending on the roundness of your neck. So now that I have my measurements down, I'm going to start cutting it out. So I'm starting off with the base. Ensure that they are equal at the ends. Okay, the only part you need it to be longer is just at the top part. So ensure that the ends are equal, and then go ahead and cut off the sides. Okay, then when you get to the armhole, please cut out the back armhole first before you take off that of the front. Okay, so you can see the difference we have there. So now we have our piece down. We're going to be fixing pockets for this. Now to fix pockets, I'll go down 1 inch from my waist point, and then I'll make a notch. So that's where my pocket is going to sit from. I'll be stitching my pocket from that point towards the down part. If you decide not to add pockets to yours, you can absolutely do that. Okay, it's not compulsory to add pockets, but this just adds a bit of character, and I love having pockets on my outfits. So it's always me adding pockets to my outfit. So now that I have my piece, I'm going to unpin, and we will start stitching it down. So if you're using the type of fabric that it's difficult to know the front and the back, please indicate them. Use your chalks to mark the wrong side, mark the right side, so that you're not confused later on. Okay, all those things turn off to, like, by the time you finish, if you sew on the wrong part of your fabric, it is a problem. So I'm just marking that 3 inches point again, which is my zip button allowance. I did it at the top, I did it at the base also. So you want to notch it. Okay, when you finish marking, you want to notch, and then go ahead and stitch. So you're going to fold the first one and fold again to end at that point where you mark, and stitch it down for the button allowance. So I've done that. This is what I have. You can see how nice this is looking already. Okay, so now we have this down. I'm going to stitch my pocket piece. I've gone ahead to cut the pocket piece. If you don't know how to cut a pocket, I'm really sorry. I didn't know that that part of the video wasn't recording. So I'm just going to place this right side to right side and stitch to the pocket. Do the same thing to the back piece also by 1/2 inch. So this is what it looks like after I finish doing that. So this is the front piece. You can see my front piece is still in two. Then I've fixed the pocket. This is what it looks like. Now for my back piece also, I've also fixed my pocket to it. That's just what I did for the back. Now I'm going to align my piece right side to right side along the shoulder areas. That's where we're going next to, and we're going to stitch it down by 1/2 inch. So when stitching your shoulder areas, stitch from the inside, like from around the neckline towards the outer part. Okay, so that in case of there are any mistakes. So I've stitched it down, stitched the shoulder area, also went ahead to stitch the sides. Now for the slit part, I left 10 inches of length. That's where I want to use for my slit. If your gown is longer, you want to leave more. If you want, even if your gown is at the same length as mine and you want to leave more, you can absolutely do that. So that opening, what we have to do is to just fold in the rough edge. You can interlock it first before doing that. And I've gone ahead to also cut my sleeve. I'm using a basic sleeve for this. So what I'll do next is just go ahead and attach my sleeve to the sleeve opening of my gown. So this is what it looks like. I folded the slit area. So like I said, if you have an overlocker, you can just overlock it and then fold it in. But since I don't have that, I just folded in the rough edge, stitched it down. I stitched the hem, and then I attached my sleeves. So now we want to go to another important part of this, the collar of our dress. So we're going to take the measurement from the tip where you have your button placket. We measure it down to the other part. So you measure from one end to the other. Please be patient. Take this measurement carefully, because any mistakes, like any omissions, will cost you dearly. So be careful while you're measuring that. So now that I have that, I have my paper. Okay, so I'm using my collar gum. This is a collar gum. I'm drafting directly to my collar gum. I have this folded in two, and I'm just ruling a line where this thing will start from, where my measurement will start from. Okay, so I've gotten my measurement, and I got about 18 and I think 18.5 inches or so. So I'm going to place that 18.5 inches measurement right here placing it down like so. So please don't add any allowances yet. Okay, just the normal measurement. That's what you need. Now from this line that I have here, you want to determine your collar stand, the inches you want for your collar stand. So for the collar stand, I'm going to be using 1.25 inches for the collar stand, like so. 1 inch, 1.25 inches, and I will place it down for the collar stand. So going from the midpoint, I'll go ahead and measure it out. So now that I've measured it out, I'll rule a straight line across to connect the points which I just marked. Okay, so this is what we have for the collar stand. Now what we're going to do is that from this end here, we come in by 1 inch and make a mark. Then from that point, I'll just rule a straight line going up. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is to come to this line and then mark the height of the collar fall you want. Okay, so come ahead and mark it here. I'm marking 2.5 inches. Now on that point I marked 2.5 inches, I'll go out by half of an inch. Okay, this is to further create a nice collar, and I'll connect to the ends like so. Okay, you can see that we have there. Now on this part here, I'll ensure that this is 2.5 again, so it's important for you to take note of those little things. Okay, now on the center front, we're going to use the folded end. We're going to use the same measurement we have on the collar stand, which is 1.25 inches. Then you go ahead and connect. You can see I'm using my curve rule to connect it to this other end like so. Okay, because that part needs to be small. Like I said, you can use more inches. Then on this end, just create a little curve because this part doesn't need to be sharp. Okay, you can see what I have there. So now what I'm going to do is that from this end here, I'll go up by 1.25 inches again. So I want to further curve the ends of my collar. I went up by 1.25 inches, and I'll just connect it back to this line like so. So this will help to, like, when I'm stitching my collar, for it to sit properly along the neckline, considering that the neckline isn't straight, it's actually curved. So now that I have this down, I'm going to cut it out. Now I'll not be cutting this out separately. You can also cut it separately, like make your collar separate, cut the collar fall separate from the collar stand if you want to. Okay, but I will not be cutting this out separately. I'll cutting it together. I'm going to stitch mine together on my shirt. So I have this down. To ensure that it's equal, please ensure that it is equal. One is not bigger, one side isn't bigger than the other. So now I'm going to bring in my piece of fabric, the piece I'll be using for my collar. So you need a piece which will serve as the main piece and another piece as your lining piece. So I'm going to fold this on the wrong face like so. Now my collar gum has a part that I can attach, like iron down to my fabric. So I'm going to place it down like this and iron. Now for this kind of collar stay, it doesn't really stay that long. So I'm going to place hemming gum underneath it while I'm ironing so that it doesn't pull up later on. Okay, and I'm pinning this down first so that it's laying flat before I go ahead and press this down. So I'm going to take off the excess fabric. You can see that I'm not cutting too close to this yet. Okay, I'm just taking the bigger part out of this. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to iron this down. I've done that and I'm taking off my pins. Okay, so now we want to stitch. To stitch this, what we're going to do is to start from one end here where my hands are pointing, stitch the top part to the other side, then leave the down part open. Okay, so this is what it looks like after I finish stitching. I've stitched it round. Please stitch very close to your collar stay. Okay, it's important for you to do that. Now I'm going to cut off the excess. You want to cut this now close to where you stitched. Okay, you take off the excess around it. please ensure to take off the excess around it, because if you don't, your collar is going to come out looking okay. I don't know the right word to use, but it's not going to look nice at all. Then when you get to this point where you have a curve, you want to make a notch going inside, like a notch very close to the part where you stitched, so that by the time you open it up, it's going to look nice. Then on the down parts, while trimming off, please leave half of an inch, which will be the allowance for joining to your neckline area. So this is what I have after I finish doing that. I'm going to make this notch here now, very close to the line where I stitched. So by the time I turn this to the right side, it's going to be very, very, very relaxed. So now we go ahead and just flip this to the right side and then fold up the excess we have at the down, which will be for joining to our collar. So this is what I have after I did that. So I folded on both ends the half of an inch which I left, and I've ironed this down. So you can see that the curves around the side are actually settling in perfectly. Now I'm going to get the midpoint of my collar. You can use your tape, get the midpoint, or you can actually just fold it up to get the midpoint of your collar. Okay, but ensure that after doing all these processes, after going through all these processes, that is actually what you had around your neckline when you measured for your collar. It's what you have on your collar piece. Okay, if it's not it, please cut a new one and start afresh so that your collar doesn't come out looking tacky. So I'm just going to get my midpoint, and I will just notch it. So you can see how careful I am about ensuring that it's at the midpoint. Then I'm going to bring in my piece, make a fold, and then get the midpoint too. That's the center back. I'm going to get a midpoint also right here. Now after getting that, I will place it together. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you can see that I'm laying this flat so that the midpoint, I can see that clearly. You want to have your pins handy for this part. Going to use this part where you don't have your collar stay. Use that part like so. Pin midpoint to midpoint, pin to the right, pin to the left. Ensure that you take your time while you're doing that. Pin it, please. So after pinning now, you go ahead and stitch by half of an inch. So this is what it looks like after I finish stitching it down. Now I'm going to use the top part to just cover it up and then stitch on top of it again to make this relaxed. So I've done that, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is the shirt. Now the next thing you want to do is to just stitch around it, but I've gone ahead to do that. You're going to just stitch around the collar, stitch the midpoint of the collar, and then go ahead and press this properly so that your collar area relaxes. Now the last thing for this is to add our buttons and our buttonholes. So your buttonholes should be on the right if you're making this for a female, and then your buttons on the left. Okay, buttonholes on the right, buttons for the left. And I just went ahead to just make a belt for mine to rock it. So this brings us to the end of this video. Let me know in the comment section if you found this helpful. If you have any questions, if you want me to make any tutorials, let me know. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like. See you next time. Bye.